Hey, hey, hello, Lake Wales.
Yeah, yes. Hello, Lake Wales from the little ladies. And I'm sorry that one of us is not here.
Yeah, we're the three little ladies, and unfortunately, there's only two little ladies here today. One of our little ladies has been sick. Juanita Zwarchik. I'm Catherine Price.
And I'm Charlene Bennett.
And we're starting this little podcast, to talk about some of the things that are going on with city government, particularly in Lake Wales. Maybe some other things in the future we'll talk about too, but that seems to be very, very interesting.
Yes.
And we've been really kind of following it really closely the last couple of years, really. You've been doing it pretty consistently for a long time. And how long were you on the Planning and Zoning Board, Charlene?
I think it was 6 years.
Right.
If I recall. Yeah, that was back when you had 2-year terms. I think I had 3 terms of 2 years, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So
the Planning and Zoning Board is a really important board in Lake Wales, particularly now with all the development coming through, because all of the different things with regard to zoning or these planned development projects or a lot of different things that big pipe plant that that went through in this last year, all of that stuff comes through the Planning and Zoning Board first.
Yeah, they're the filter for everything. If it doesn't get past them, it can't. An applicant can go over their head and go on to the city commission and trying to get through that way. But most things do get resolved at the Planning and Zoning Board level.
Right. So we wanted to talk a little bit today about this concept. The first thing I wanted to say is we really appreciate this coverage that Robert Connors has been giving through it's called www.lakewalesnews.net. It's a local digital newspaper. And through that newspaper, they did a really good job of investigative reporting in the last week. It's about a $1.2 million contract for a business incubator in the Lake Wales community. I think it's paid for through the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA, which we're probably going to need to talk about a little bit more in the future, because I'm just learning how the CRA works and some of the kind of odd projects that seem to be going through the CRA. One of them is this giveaway of the city Lake Alta's Park is going through the CRA. That's why we were down there at this Community Redevelopment Agency the other day trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, and that came on the heels of the $4 million giveaway of impact fees. And then there was the unusual, what seemed to me a giveaway to one individual of $100,000 for future work that took place at the CRA meeting also. So it's been a series of things.
Right. And so, we go in as citizens, and a small band of us, really, we've done a lot of research when we go in there, and we're presenting stuff that I think any person that was a critical thinker or someone who is looking at something somewhat with a jaundiced eye and wanting to make sure that everything's going to go well with any project in the city, we're asking questions that I think any reasonable person would ask. And, sometimes, so we have, there's several meetings that there's a lot of meetings at the city, okay? And a lot of them take place during the day when working people cannot attend. The first one is the workshop that they have on Wednesdays, the week prior to the city commission. Usually the city commission is every 2 weeks. It doesn't always fall exactly like that, but every 2 weeks is a city commission meeting. And then on the alternate week, on the Wednesday at 2:00, they have their workshops. And those workshops, you go into them and you can't talk. The public is not allowed to talk, but the city commissioners, they talk a lot in there.
In fact, that's where they do most of their learning about the agenda items and where they do most of the discussion and where there are presentations made by others that are not repeated at the city commission meeting. So there's so much meat that goes on in a workshop where people can't attend because they're working and where they can't talk. And then when it gets to the commission meeting, that stuff is just quickly gone through because the commissioners are all already know what they want to do with every item pretty much.
Yeah, I always thought that the purpose of allowing the public to speak was that they could have some impact on the decision that the commissioners made. But when they separate it by an entire week, they do all of their discussion at that Wednesday workshop. And like you said, there was a presentation like on economic development in the city by the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Council. There was, it seems like there was another presentation. I think the one that Autumn Cuccello, who's the growth management director, made concerning some things. So anyway, so it's like there's these things, and then there's the Tuesday City Commission meeting, and at the end of these meetings, and then we were introduced to the CRA this past week on Tuesday, and it was at 2:00 in the afternoon. Also, and it's the Community Redevelopment Agency, and there's a lot of money that is going through that thing, and some kind of strange projects that are being put through there. But again, the public is allowed these very limited opportunities to stand up and say their say, and we're not allowed to rebut anything. We're not allowed to ask a question in the meetings. And yet, say a developer or someone else who's presenting, they get up, they get to talk to the commissioners, go back and forth, that type of thing. And so we've taken to kind of making some statements at the beginning of the meetings because we study the agendas and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we don't get to have give and take like the developers do. The developers get give and take, but citizens do not. And they've made it very clear in the last few meetings that they're not going to answer questions from citizens. They'll listen to us, but they're not going to answer questions. They're unwilling to engage in give and take. But public debate is it's very important, and there's a history of it in this country. And I personally think that we haven't found the right balance of conversation or civic discourse that's comfortable, at least for citizens in this community, and maybe it's not also good for commissioners in terms of their complete learning about things either.
Well, I know that during the pandemic, everything was digital for a while, even for I think for the city commission a little while, and then that city commissioners came back, but the public really didn't come back for a year or two. And so some of these commissioners came on during that period, and they had gotten kind of acclimated. Matter of fact, that huge subdivision that they put in there next to Lake Ashton, there was nobody that even said anything about that because most of us didn't even know about it till it was a done deal and after the fact. So when we started coming back into the city commission meetings, I went to that strategic planning meeting where I was not allowed to say anything for it was like 3 days. I sat there. It's like they didn't want to hear from us. They were like, who are these people? They're from outer space. And why are they standing up and giving us a hard time about what we're trying to do?
That's right. They've made it clear that they would just as soon not hear from the public. They did everything they could, like a year and a half ago, to crunch the amount of time that would be available to the public. And it was so clear that they really would rather not hear much from us. And the only way we combated what they were trying to do was, I think it was you who brought in a report from an outside attorney that made it clear that what they were doing was in violation of a state law. And so they had to back off of the extreme limitations that they were trying to place on public discourse.
Well, and before even that happened, they were rolling out these what they call service area maps that it turned out had been developed by a few of the larger landowners and a couple of consultants who sat around a room and carved up the city and said, these are the maps of what's going to be, where there's going to be our service areas. And they brought them out first they were supposed to come in September. I think it was 2 years ago now? Mm-hmm. And they, or a year and a half ago, and they were going to just bring them out. So like 100 people showed up down at the Austin Center, and they had not really prepared any kind of presentation because they didn't really expect anybody, because they had done a really bad job, almost mm-hmm. felt like on purpose, of advertising it. But when 100 people showed up and were concerned about these maps, it was a real big embarrassment, because they were just totally unprepared to even do a presentation, answer questions. It was like chaos. People left and were angry because they were angry at the city. And that's when so it was really citizen participation at that point that drove getting this Lake Wales Envisioned process started.
Yeah. So let me suggest, Catherine, that we're getting closer to a topic that we thought we might talk about a little bit today, which is the way we citizens and the commissioners interact with each other. Because at the last meeting, Commissioner Gibson said that we often didn't speak with civility when we were talking about land use issues, and I just, that's something that really concerns me, because I don't think that his version of civility is particularly applicable to town halls. If you think about town halls across the country, and they tend to be pretty contentious sometimes, and people do get angry and upset. And I think we need to think in terms of whether or not some of those behaviors that may be outside of civil are appropriate in town hall meetings. What do you think?
And you have to know, if you haven't been going to the city commission meetings, at the end of each one of these meetings, there's a time when either the mayor or is at the CRA, it was Robin Gibson, who was the chair of the CRA. Oh, by the way, the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency Board, is the same as the city commission, even though they're overseeing all this money, which is a little odd to me. But at any rate, they hand something to the CRA, and then the CRA gives it away. So that's what we're dealing with, this little Lake Alta City Park. Mm-hmm. The city gave them the park. The park's going to be given to a developer, or at least that was the plan. Mm-hmm. So the CRA, at the end of the workshop, the regular meeting, and at the CRA, they have this opportunity to kind of opine and do like a little, mini homily about what they're thinking or feeling. And so they're particularly pointed at the meetings where there aren't a lot of public, like at the workshops. They often talk rather condescendingly about the public, about how uncivil the public is, and they wish that we could come together, sort of, as my son would have called, a kumbaya moment, where we're all treating each other really nice, and almost like the way you would talk in a church. Now, we all know that three members up there, two members, Mr. Keith Thompson and Danny Krieger, are members of Jack Hilligoss's church. And then, of course, Daniel Williams is a minister, and they're all friends. And so we have this sort of like, it's almost like they have this idea that we're supposed to be behaving in these city commission meetings like we're in their church.
Well, you know what? If you look up the definition of civility, you see words like courtesy, respect, things that create that kind of mild ambiance. But to enforce something like that, it also can reinforce the status quo in political power, because there's a limitation on how people can say things and what they can say when you're talking about civility. And in that situation, I think civility can actually be a tool for suppressing dissent. And dissent is one of the treasured rights in this country.
Right. And the thing about it is there's a lot going on. Like, there's an incredible amount of development that's being rubber stamped by our city commission. And some of this stuff is stuff that people don't agree with, like this, like, the pipe plant was very contentious. And I think continues to be, a rather controversial decision that the city commission made about building this humongous 710,000 square foot pipe plant south of town. And the fact that some people were very strongly opposed to it didn't go well. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that Jack Hilligoss was upset is because he wanted to limit debate on that plant to people that were just within the city limits, and if you were outside of the city limits, he was going to say you couldn't do that. But it turned out that was illegal based on the, and a friend of mine, she just happened to be reading the article, and we'd had some, disagreement at the commission meeting, and she said that's not legal. And she happened to be an expert, and she wrote us a legal brief that we just delivered and laid on the desk of the city attorney, Chuck Galloway, and on the desk of the city commissioners. And they backed away from preventing, because a lot of people were going to be impacted by that plant that did not live directly in the city limits. Mm-hmm. So civic, I think that there's a lot of things that go on in the city commission here that are not particularly conducive to people being in a great, a mood to be completely, as they quote, civil all the time, because some of the things that they do, in my mind, have been pretty disrespectful to the community at large. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And, being a little uppity and indecorous is, it's an important thing that's happened when you look back throughout history. Think of how important that was to get women's rights, the use of those kinds of behaviors. Think of where the blacks would be if they hadn't spoken truth to power in very forceful ways, of ways that were far out of the limits of the word civility.
Well, sometimes when people are in power, they think that everybody is supposed to just be docile.
Yes.
And so just accept it. I had a friend, I'm Southerner. I've lived in the South all my life. And this was a friend of mine. He's from the Midwest, and he had done his PhD dissertation on Southern women. So he thought he was an expert on Southern women, but he wasn't. But one of the funny things he said to me, he says, in the South, people would rather you be polite than be right. And I do think that there was something to that sometimes people in the South, they want you to be polite. And it doesn't matter whether the issue, you're wrong on the issue, dead wrong, but, you're supposed to be, sweet and polite, particularly if you're a woman, and because I think that we as women there get different treatment than the men get as well.
Yeah. I can agree with that more, because I used to live further north, and I can remember that sort of thing just wasn't on anybody's radar, whether or not you're civil or not. You're allowed to speak in colorful language and say what you think, and that all comes into the category of freedom of speech. So yeah. The other thing I think that we need to think about too is that when citizens get up to speak about land use issues, I mean, what could they be more passionate about, really? It's at the heart of what they do. They own a house that has all kinds of implications. Land use has all kinds of implications for them. So they may be feeling angry, they may be feeling hurt, they may be feeling sidelined. There are all kinds of emotions that may be going on that make them erupt into things that some people find less than acceptable or less than pleasant. And that's the way it is in town halls in the country of the United States.
It is amazing, I don't think that we've come in there and we've ever said anything like really libelous to the city commissioners.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we come in there and we just present the information, they go, "You're calling us a liar." Well, it's like we didn't call them a liar. We just showed what happened. We showed the facts of what happened. Or they'll say, "You're talking about all these nefarious things that are happening at the city." And, because there's a lot of stuff that does go on behind closed doors. And we have, you and I have clawed and begged and made public records requests over and over again, just get sometimes what is very simple information, but nobody will speak straight to you. At the city, I think they're maybe getting a little bit better, but it's like because we have just basically kept going back and asking and asking and asking. And they don't make it easy for citizens to get information. Like with the Planning and Zoning Board, they don't video. I think the workshops they videotape, the city commissions they videotape. So if somebody is at work or they can't get there, they can watch and listen. They can also pull up the video and watch it later, right? But
Yes.
They don't do that with the planning and zoning. So we've been scratching and trying to figure out what happened at that last city commission, that last planning and zoning meeting for quite some time because they don't publish the minutes. There was no video. They also, with the planning and zone, all of these minutes, they don't publish them until like Friday afternoon late for the next Tuesday meeting. With the city commission and the workshops, they do hyperlink the attachments, but they don't do that for planning and zoning. So you've got to go beg for the documents for planning and zoning, which of all the different committees, you would think that would be the most important one to have things hyperlinked for the public.
And maybe that's something we need to go ask them about. Ask for them to please start putting in the all the attachments for the Planning and Zoning Board agendas.
Well, I think they need to, for the Planning and Zoning Board, they need to hyperlink the attachments so that at home, if people see an item that they find to be interesting or of concern, they can very easily pull it up and look at it over the weekend. And then the other thing is they need to be videotaping those planning and zoning meetings so that the public can go back and look at them. If something happens, you can go back and you can see what happened. But, if we go and we ask for that, and we say, we feel like this is a problem, then we're accused of being not civil. Why are we not being nice and things like that, which I think is ridiculous. I think that the other thing is, it's like because there's so many, like a preacher and all these people from the church. And now we're finding out that even with this, some of these different, like that issue with the business incubator that Robert wrote about, the gentleman, Mr. Blue, he's a preacher at Jack's church.
Yes, he is. He's
like, we have,
He is actually introduced on some of the videos that we've watched recently as one of the 4 training pastors, the training team in that church. So he has a significant role at that church. And that's something that we haven't heard of. I mean, this Mr. Blue has appeared at city commission several times, and there was never anything remotely that would indicate to us that he was associated with Jack Hillegas's church. And I feel kind of, I don't know, slighted somehow in that information hasn't been available to us.
Well, I think that when they make these little snide remarks at the end of their presentations at these meetings, the problem is the public, i.e. you or me or whoever else they're making the snide remarks about, can't come back and say, well, we don't think that what you're doing right here in this particular incident is very civil as well. We want to be treated with respect. We also want to be included in decisions. We want to know how decisions are made. It should be transparent. And
yeah, speaking of decisions, I think we should raise a question about Hillegas votes on the CRA decisions that relate to the BizLink to the incubator. And yet one of his pastors, his associate pastors, is the CEO of that organization. Shouldn't he be recusing himself?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is give information, talk about things that, because we have the time to kind of go out and go to these meetings and assimilate this information. And a lot of people, they work, they don't have time to go out and collect information, figure out what's going on. And, also, I think we're kind of trying to model what civic engagement is in this town. I think a lot of people have become quite jaded and, thinking that their participation in government isn't important. But I think that because of our involvement here, that things are better in Lake Wales than they would have been if we had just not spoken out. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to continue that that mode. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And, we miss Juanita because she always has a few little spicy things to say about things.
Yeah. Well, she'll be back next time.
Right. And again, we want to encourage everybody to go out and read that article. That's an important article. Also, there's an update on the Lake Alta Park situation. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to go before the Planning and Zoning Board at 5:30 p.m. On
the 27th.
Tuesday, February 27th. Yes. Right. So, anybody that's interested in that and concerned about the city basically giving away a little city park to a developer might want to show up at that.
Okay. Well, it's been nice chatting with you today, Catherine, and looking forward to next time when we get Juanita back.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Okay.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.